In 1992, in Bozeman, Montana, an 8-year-old boy named Evan Whitaker vanished from his bedroom in the middle of the night. No noise, no signs of struggle, just a scrap of paper left beneath the bed, bearing 4 words: "We have him." The case quickly became one of the most haunting disappearances in state history. No arrests, no leads, no body. 32 years later, at a psychiatric care facility more than 200 miles away, an unidentified man appeared. He couldn't recall who he was, but he kept repeating one name: Sean Whitaker. The name of his twin brother. March 14th, 2024, 2:18 a.m. A man, appearing in his mid-30s, was found walking alone near the eastern perimeter fence of Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. His coat was torn. He wore no shoes. He carried no ID. The security guard who first approached him assumed he was a drifter. But as the man turned and locked eyes with him, he spoke softly, like a phrase rehearsed over 1,000 times. "My name is Evan. I'm looking for my brother. His name is Sean." At Deaconess Behavioral Hospital in Billings, doctors couldn't identify him through any database. No fingerprints. No criminal history. No health insurance record. But when a hospital investigator ran the name Evan Whitaker through the National Missing Children's Registry, the result appeared instantly. Child missing since November 1992, Bozeman, MT. Evan Whitaker, 8 years old when he vanished. Today, he would be 40. The man now sitting under a buzzing fluorescent light in a stark white room looked exactly that age. About 5'9", lean, pale eyes, quiet voice. He spoke in clipped phrases, a behavioral pattern common in long-term isolation survivors. But what chilled the staff most was this. He didn't ask where he was. He didn't question what year it was, or why the world around him had changed. He didn't ask for family. He made no requests. Only one sentence, repeated every few hours. "I need to see Sean. I'm the one who stayed." News of the incident reached retired Lieutenant Miles Reddick, a former investigator with Bozeman PD who had worked the Whitaker case back in '92. Though retired, he still advised on cold cases. He was invited to observe the man at Deaconess. Standing in the observation room, Reddick froze. This can't be. On the table, the man was sketching with a pencil. A crude drawing of 2 boys in front of a beige 2-story house. One held a map. The other stood in the window. It was unmistakably the Whitaker home. Could it be? Is it possible? Reddick whispered. Then a chilling thought crossed his mind. If this really is Evan, then everything we thought we knew about that night in 1992 might be wrong. Lieutenant Reddick called Sean Whitaker, now 40, working maintenance for a public rec center in Helena. The call lasted only 36 seconds. Reddick said just 4 words. "Someone says he's Evan." There was silence. Then Sean replied, "I'll come, but if it's not him, you don't let it near me." March 15th, 2024. The sky was a dull gray. Old snow still clung to the ridgelines. Sean Whitaker drove alone from Helena to Billings, more than 3 hours through cold, barren plains. He kept the radio off. Didn't stop once. He didn't check the mirrors, didn't speak, as if the world outside the car no longer concerned him. A man who had buried half his life beneath the shadow of a vanished twin was now driving toward a question no one had dared ask. What really happened to Evan? At Deaconess Behavioral Hospital, room 214A sat at the end of a low-security ward. The man calling himself Evan sat near the window, eyes distant, pencil in hand. On the desk before him was a sketch, a playground, slightly tilted swing, patches of trampled grass. The image was nearly identical to the backyard of the Whitaker home in 1992. Not artistic, but precise, as if drawn from somewhere deep inside, not just remembered, but preserved. When Sean entered, the air thickened. No greetings, no words. Just two faces once identical, now sharing only the empty space between them. The doctors noted stable vitals, slow, steady heart rate, normal response to sound, no visible signs of distress at Sean's presence. The man didn't flinch, didn't ask who Sean was, didn't seem to expect or fear anything. He behaved like someone whose reactions had been shaped, not learned, like a routine etched into him. Biometric analysis returned 2 days later. DNA showed a 90% match with the Whitaker family. The margin of error was attributed to micromutation or prolonged biological isolation. Post-1992 medical history? None. No vaccination scars. No injection marks. No civilian health indicators. In every database, this man simply hadn't existed after age 8. FBI agent Mia Hargrove took special interest in one detail. The skin on his arms bore no BCG scar, no vein traces from IVs or blood work. A body untouched by modern medicine. Not just unusual, but almost impossible for someone living freely in the U.S. for 3 decades. Internal briefings resumed. The FBI reopened the case file from 1992. Declassified portions of the original investigation were reviewed. Surviving investigators, including retired Lieutenant Reddick, were called in. Reddick confirmed the sketch the man drew matched the Whitaker home, right down to the swing set and maple tree by the front walk. But it was the precision that troubled him most. Memories don't stay that sharp after 30 years, not unless they weren't memories at all. But something inserted. 1 week after the man claiming to be Evan surfaced, FBI Special Agent Mia Hargrove and her federal task force were granted access to Cold War-era military archives categorized as static storage, not officially classified, but long neglected. At the Defense Records Center in St. Louis, a cluster of files repeatedly referenced the designation Anvil, Echo Unit, 1991-1993, appearing in internal transfers between the Department of Defense and a facility labeled as the Pre-Deployment Behavioral Conditioning Initiative, PBCI. Most of the content was redacted, but fragments of haunting phrases remained: twin response conditioning, non-linear imprint tests, and Princess Room Protocol active at Site 4. A handwritten annotation in blue ink appeared on a supplemental page. Subject E92 failed Phase 3. Transfer recommended. No reintegration. No name, no photo. But E92 matched the year Evan vanished, and the letter E might not have been coincidental. Malmstrom Air Force Base, where the man was found, had once served as a command center for intercontinental missile operations. After 1990, many adjacent training zones were dismantled, including Echo Complex, a remote installation once tied to behavioral trials on low-ranking military recruits. Officially, Echo Complex had never existed. Agent Hargrove and a forensic terrain team conducted a search in the eastern woods near the base, guided by outdated topographic scans. At coordinates 47 meters in 52N, 47W, they discovered a partially collapsed concrete foundation. Beneath the soil and rock, they uncovered a steel sliding door, breached from the inside. Inside lay a crumbling corridor leading to 3 small rooms. The walls bore faint remnants of pink paint. One two-way mirror was shattered. The floor showed impressions from rolling casters, possibly from medical gurneys or lab carts. In the final room, a broken plywood table lay overturned. And in the corner, scrawled in what appeared to be ash or dried blood, were the words, "I am the one they left behind." A field report sent to FBI headquarters at Quantico confirmed. The physical layout of the Echo site matched the man's earlier descriptions of a white room. Moisture levels, residual chemical traces in the wall paint, and the interior design all aligned with 1980s, 1990s era U.S. military behavioral conditioning labs. No record listed who ran it, no commanding officer. No funding trail. A facility built to leave no footprint. Meanwhile, at Deaconess Hospital, the man began displaying a recurring behavior. Each morning, he stood motionless in front of the mirror for exactly 17 minutes. No blinking, no movement. When asked why, he gave only one explanation: to make sure I still reflect the right person. Nurses suspected a form of dissociative identity disorder, but for Agent Hargrove, it hinted at something far more dangerous: a man questioning whether his identity had been manufactured. The question was no longer, is this man Evan? It was, who was he, and what was he turned into? As details of the Echo complex came to light, the FBI broadened its investigation into Cold War-era federal contracts, tracking collaborative programs between the Department of Defense and behavioral research contractors active during the 1980s and 1990s. In a batch of declassified documents from 2002, a name surfaced: Dr. Leonard Wexler, a military psychologist formerly assigned to the Army's Personnel Behavior Division, known for experimenting with behavioral pattern reconstruction under isolation. Wexler disappeared in 1995, but remnants of his work remained. Among them, protocols detailing deconstruction reintegration processes, breaking down identity, then rebuilding it through tightly controlled inputs. Particularly disturbing was his focus on twin children as ideal test subjects. The objective was not just training, but testing psychological replacement. If one twin's identity was erased and replaced with filtered memory, could the surviving twin still recognize them? In Wexler's final signed memo, one line stood out: no one accepts a reversed reflection of themselves unless forced to believe it's all that's left. Meanwhile, Sean Whitaker agreed to participate in a controlled memory validation test conducted by the FBI's Forensic Behavioral Unit. The goal was to see whether the man claiming to be Evan could recall memories too specific or obscure to have been faked. But Sean imposed one condition: the man couldn't be told it was a test. Inside a surveillance room, Sean listed off a series of deeply personal memories, ones only Evan would know. Incidents like Evan cutting his arm climbing a fence, or the day they secretly buried a dead kitten in a shoebox behind the house, afraid their mother would cry. The man responded without pause, each answer precise, unhesitant. He recalled not just events, but details: smells, sounds, the weather that day. FBI psychologists didn't find it comforting. They found it alarming. Real memories don't behave that way. Human recall is fragmented, flawed, often contradictory. But this man's memories were seamless, almost memorized. That raised a darker hypothesis. Perhaps he hadn't forgotten who he was, but had been overwritten with a selectively engineered identity. The concept wasn't theoretical. Memory refinement under enforced stimuli had been documented in military programs using looped audio, light pulse entrainment, and sensory deprivation. The 1991 Echo Neural Standard Report described similar techniques and similar outcomes. At the hospital, the man's behavior grew increasingly precise. He began arranging everything in perfect symmetry: meal trays, shoes, pillows, towels, all mirrored, edge-aligned, facing one another. If anything was even slightly out of place, he would freeze and correct it before continuing any activity. Nurses suspected OCD. But Agent Hargrove wrote something else in her report. This isn't compulsion. He's maintaining internal stability of a structure that might not even be his. The original question, "Has Evan returned?" began to collapse under its own weight. A new one emerged in its place. How much of what's inside this man still belongs to Evan? 32 years later, the old Whitaker home on the outskirts of Bozeman still stood. The paint had faded, the eaves were rotting, and the siding had buckled from years of snow and rain, but the bones of the house remained unchanged. With permission from the current owners, the FBI conducted a full forensic sweep using LiDAR wall scanning, thermal sensors, and ground-penetrating radar. Nothing stood out on the main floor. But in the attic, once used by Sean's father to store old boxes, the forensic team discovered a floorboard that had been pried open and resealed with mismatched nails. Beneath it was a small wooden box, thick with dust, its lid unlatched. Inside were 3 objects: an unlabeled VHS tape, a faded rubber ball with a worn superhero design, and a small scrap of cloth cut from a child's pajama shirt. Sean was brought in to identify the items. He immediately recognized the ball. It had once belonged to Evan, lost 2 weeks before the disappearance. This one bore a distinct bite mark on the edge, a mark Evan had made in a tantrum. The fabric matched the star-patterned pajamas Evan had worn the night he vanished, pajamas never found afterward. The VHS tape was sent to a digital recovery lab. Though moldy and magnetically degraded, the tape yielded faint footage: 2 children sitting opposite one another in a dimly lit room. One wore star-patterned pajamas. The other wore plain clothing. Neither spoke. Off-screen, an adult male voice repeated a set of simple prompts. "Who am I? What's your name? If the other one lies, what do you do?" Each incorrect answer triggered a sharp, high-pitched tone. Both children flinched. The recording lasted just over 6 minutes. No identifiable faces. No clear location. But the brass, spiral-shaped doorknob in the background perfectly matched a door previously documented at Echo Complex by FBI forensic teams. This was the first physical evidence linking the man at Deaconess Hospital to the 1992 disappearance of Evan Whitaker. And it hinted at something darker. Evan may not have been abducted by a stranger. He may have been transferred as an experimental subject. Shortly after, the investigative team re-examined a long-dismissed tip from 1992, an anonymous letter sent to the state police, warning of a juvenile substitution program for military behavioral research. At the time, the claim was discarded as baseless, its author unidentified. Now, handwriting analysis confirmed a high probability that the same person had written both that letter and the message found on the Echo Complex wall. Someone inside the system had tried to warn them, but no one had listened. Shortly after the VHS footage was confirmed authentic, the FBI expanded its investigation to include parallel programs operated between 1990 and 1994. Agent Hargrove's task force gained access to a set of internal documents from the Defense Civilian Office, labeled Janus R, Restricted, Level 2, a program centered on identity division in twin children, focused on preserving oneself and discarding the other. The files detailed test pair units, twin subjects placed in isolated observation environments to assess the development of individualized identity when separated from their biological mirror. From each pair, only one child was ever reintroduced to civilian society. The other was retained at facility-grade units. Location unknown. Out of 12 total test pairs, only 3 were recorded as reintegrated, 2 of whom later died from acute psychosis within 2 years. The designation E92 surfaced again, listed as subject lost during Phase 3 transit, presumed unrecoverable. Meanwhile, the man at Deaconess continued to exhibit ritualized behaviors. Each night he walked 7 laps around the room before lying down, always on his left side, keeping his eyes open for 15 minutes until the hallway lights went dark. Psych evaluators noted an absence of emotional response to the word family, but an unusually sharp reaction to the words replacement and only one. In a free association word test, when prompted with the term brother, he wrote 2 words: twin left behind. After weeks of silence, Sean Whitaker agreed to a second contact session, on one condition: it would take place inside their old family home in Bozeman, where everything had started. The house had since been vacated. With permission, the FBI reconstructed the 1992 interior based on old photos and family testimony. When the man entered, he paused at the wall near the staircase, where family portraits had once hung. There were no pictures there now, but he pointed to each position in order and repeated, "I used to be here, but not the one they kept." An FBI linguist later noted, "This phrasing wasn't metaphorical. It mirrored terminology from selective retention systems. The emerging question, who was kept, and by what criteria?" In the basement, where Sean's father once kept an old armchair and bookshelf, the man knelt down, scraped dust off the floor, and drew a dual spiral glyph, the same symbol found in Janus R materials. It could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. The FBI formally declared that this individual was directly linked to Janus R and likely the only surviving subject from the Echo system. But if only one was kept, was Sean truly the one who came home? Or had he, for 32 years, unknowingly been the replacement? Helena, Montana. 3 days after the re-encounter. Sean Whitaker hadn't left his home. His phone was off. The curtains remained drawn. Coworkers at the municipal maintenance center where he worked reported that he had taken leave without notice, wasn't answering messages, and hadn't come to pick up his paycheck. The FBI dispatched a quiet observer to monitor for potential self-harm. When agents checked in, they found Sean sitting alone in his darkened kitchen, surrounded by dozens of childhood photos, most of them cut in half. One side of each picture lay scattered across the floor. The other half, all featuring only Sean's face intact, had been taped meticulously across the walls. Evan's image gone. On the floor sat a notebook. The first page, handwritten in black ink, read, "If I'm the replacement, then why do I remember things he couldn't? And if I'm not Evan, then who's lived with this loss for 32 years?" The FBI revisited the 1992 case file. Back then, Sean, just 8 years old, had been interviewed by a child forensic team 3 days after Evan's disappearance. The original audio was never released, but the transcript showed one overlooked detail. Sean had drawn 2 stick figures, one sleeping, one standing beside the bed, and had written beneath them, "That wasn't my brother." At the time, psychologists chalked it up to trauma-induced confusion and a blurred line between imagination and reality. But now, in this new light, it could mean something entirely different. Yoon. Forensic specialists re-examined Sean's biological records. A disturbing revelation surfaced. The only DNA sample used to confirm Sean's identity back then came from a bloodstain on the shirt he wore the night Evan vanished. There had been no independent verification, no tissue samples from prior years, no baseline for comparison. In other words, no one had ever conclusively proven that Sean was Sean. He had simply been the one left behind, and so assumed to be correct. The implications spread like a quiet wildfire through the investigative team. If Janus R. had indeed run identity substitutions, and if one child had been conditioned into assuming the role of the other, then Sean's grief, his 32 years of living beneath a missing twin, might not be rooted in memory. It might have been assigned. Meanwhile, the man at Deaconess made a surprising request to legally change his name, not to reclaim Evan Whitaker, but rather, "I'm no longer Evan, but I can't keep being nobody." He chose the name Evan Saul, explaining he wished to keep a part of what I was, without belonging to where I came from. The petition was filed with the Yellowstone County Court, accompanied by documents noting indeterminate identity and a request for psychological distancing from childhood associations. The FBI did not object. No one could say for certain whether the old name still matched the person now alive. In late April 2024, the FBI's Audio Analysis Division completed its restoration of the distorted voice captured on the VHS tape found in the Whitaker attic. Using spectral deconstruction, they isolated the male voice speaking off-camera, the one prompting the two children in the footage with, "What is your name? If the other lies, what do you do?" The voice print was run through the Federal Audio Registry. It returned a 91% match to a long dormant profile. Dr. Leonard Wexler, the military psychologist associated with the Janus R program, who had officially disappeared in 1995. Wexler's name hadn't appeared on any federal contracts after 1993. His Social Security status was marked inactive. No death certificate was ever filed. But his voice had survived. From archived materials, investigators reconstructed Wexler's last known appearance. ID photo from 1992, approximately 5 to 10. Sunken eyes, prematurely gray hair, low register voice. He had been described as someone who didn't control behavior through force, but through flawless simulation. Around the same time, an unexpected lead surfaced from a veterans hospital in Spokane, Washington. A male patient, treated there between 1996 and 2004, had exhibited psychiatric patterns eerily similar to those described in the anonymous letter sent to Montana State Police in 1992, the one dismissed and forgotten. His name, Thomas R. Vale, born 1949. Diagnosed with post-service PTSD, advanced language skills, and an extreme adverse reaction to the words mirror and replacement. After comparing archived photos, handwriting samples, and fingerprint data with the letter and echo site graffiti, investigators confirmed a legal match. Most telling was the handwritten TV signature on the original 1992 letter, long considered anonymous, now confirmed to be Vale's. According to VA medical files, Vale had briefly worked at an unlisted behavioral research facility in Montana between 1991 and 1992, never officially registered as a full-time employee. In other words, he was a system ghost, and most likely the one who had tried to warn the world about the twin substitution experiment 3 decades ago. During a classified interview, Vale, now in his 70s, said little. But when asked about the name Evan Whitaker, he spoke one line. "I told them to shut it down. But Echo doesn't go silent. It just changes frequency." Then he smiled, not like a madman, but like a man who knew he'd been right, and was now too late to be believed. After the voice analysis leaked, national media began reporting on a buried twin experiment. The government issued no comment. Meanwhile, a group of retired servicemen formerly stationed at Malmstrom claimed they had heard of Echo, but were told never to speak of it. Doubt spread. But Evan Saul, formerly Evan Whitaker, did not comment. He requested to leave Montana to begin a life off record, with no press, no paperwork, and no real name. And for the first time in the investigation, the FBI did not object, because maybe they had already seen enough. June 2024. An internal FBI case file was marked closed under non-prosecutable classification, not because the matter had been resolved, but because no existing legal framework could adequately address what had been uncovered. Echo Complex was sealed off, then dismantled within the second week of the month. All remaining physical evidence was archived indefinitely at the federal storage facility in Quantico. No official names were tied to its oversight. No indictments were issued. No one from any federal agency stepped forward. On paper, the disappearance of Evan Whitaker remains unsolved. But no one involved in the investigation believes the real question was ever who took him. The question was, who reprogrammed him, and why? After his legal name change, Evan Saul left Montana in midsummer without disclosing his destination. The last recorded cell tower ping placed him at a bus station near the Idaho border. Since then, he has vanished from all networks. The FBI made no effort to trace him further. They understood, those who were once turned into carriers of substituted memory, if they survive, can only live on the fringe of the world. As for Sean Whitaker, he never returned to work, never left his house, never answered calls. In the same worn notebook on a new page, a final handwritten line appeared, the ink shaky. I used to think I was the one left behind. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe I was created to replace him. 1 week later, Sean was admitted to Missoula Behavioral Center under temporary psychiatric isolation. Doctors described his condition as identity fragmentation with temporal dissociation. No signs of violence, but also no speech, only silence. As if, when truth has no place left to land, a person is reduced to only a body, nameless, wordless. Back at the old Whitaker home, where the VHS tape had been discovered, a new family moved in. They knew nothing of the house's history. In the attic, they noticed faint scratches along a support beam. Under angled sunlight, a single penciled line could be made out. If they forget me, maybe I'll become real. The story of Evan and Sean Whitaker has no ending, only a lingering absence, where one child vanished, one returned, and neither was ever truly certain who they were, because some memories do not belong to the one who holds them. And some names are nothing more than hollow replicas, programmed to repeat something that was never theirs.